Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Lentini, founder of Lord and Lentini, founder of the acornbraincoach.com, and founder of Helping People Buy, which is now also an app for training salespeople, along with the book you can see over my shoulder here, right over. No, the left shoulder. That's right. The camera. I have to get used to it, reversing things. So this is a series on leadership, and today is the summary, and a lot of it is based on my books. And so here's just a sample of some of them. One is your brain is brilliant, but it's not always your friend. And this is really important for leaders to get, because if your teams aren't performing, you're responsible. If you've got complaints about people, if you've got grievances looping in your mind, it's because you haven't done something about it. And you're leading the team in a way that fosters all that behavior. You're modeling behavior. And so some of the other books this is all based on is No BS Coaching. Wake up from the stories you tell yourself, right? Because the mind gathers evidence to prove whatever you think is true, despite any evidence to the contrary. And then after that book, I wrote How to Train Your Mind, written by a dragon, Program Your Mind for Success. We can reprogram our minds and learn not to believe every thought. And what the beginning of that path is noticing. Begin to notice just how small-minded your thinking is. I call it the acorn brain. And you need to reprogram that mind first by noticing. But don't take my word for it. If you're not getting the results that you want in your business, you're responsible for it. Then I wrote Helping People Buy, because it's a sales methodology customers trust and salespeople love. And I included this acorn brain work in it because we miss, as leaders, as salespeople, it doesn't matter, as parents, we miss what's going on in the other person's mind, especially if they're a buyer and they don't know you. And so I make very clear how to manage the mind and how to, as a leader, understand you're creating whatever environment you're experiencing. And there's no way we can escape that, because, by the way, that's how we program our lives. It's the same thing in our lives. Whatever you focus on, whatever you feed, grows in a universe. So a leader that's having challenges with their teams has to first look at how their thinking is creating that and how they're modeling a behavior they're seeing from others. So I've had many CEOs over the years tell me, well, my teams don't tell me the truth. Why? So some of that is your responsibility. You have to ask, where are you modeling a behavior where people feel unsafe? They psychologically don't feel like they're safe to share the truth with you. So that means somewhere you've been a reaction, you've been angry, and you shut people down with that energy. And the more you feed that, you got to prove this to yourself, but you'll get more of that. And you will get more of that. So then let's suppose you don't like getting feedback. You think your team will like getting feedback? And let's suppose that people take risks, and then there's a feeling of being beaten up for taking the risk, that failure isn't okay. And by the way, Dr. Daniel Amen says there is no failure. It's wins and learns. Wins and lessons. And I love that thought process, because the failure is a thought of the acorn brain. It's a judgment. It's that small-minded thinker. And some people, this should be a Brazil nut, because they're so hard to crack, they're not self-aware. Leaders are often angry outwardly and then wonder why their teams don't feel safe to share the truth with them. They wonder why the team won't take risks. They wonder why the team is filled with gossip and complaining. because they're modeling it somewhere. As a leader, you have to encourage people to take a complaint with a request to the person or the people that can do something about it. I've given this keynote address at companies, and they benefited from that conversation. The thing is, it needs to be reinforced, because if it isn't reinforced, what do you think people default back to? This brain goes back to, because it loves to complain. It loves to be blameless and not be accountable. And we can reprogram that. Now, I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I still catch my acorn brain defaulting to the old patterns and whatever it is, whether it's the victim thinking or the tale of woe, or wanting to engage in gossip about others, or developing a complaint loop in my mind and not doing anything about it with the people or persons that can do something about it. Right? So if you're in the lunchroom complaining to people who can't do anything about it, your coworkers, for example, or you're calling a friend on Friday night who works on the sales team with you, and you're all complaining about the company, it's wasted energy. And if your leaders are doing any kind of complaining in management meetings, it's wasted energy. I once worked with a company where the COO was calling the CEO the fearless leader. You want to hear what our fearless leader said the other day? It was very negative. And then in team meetings, this COO would actually call out other members that didn't make the meeting. Other managers would be absent, and then they'd get talked about. So she thought maybe that would encourage attendance to the managers' meetings. What happened was it was harming the whole company. And I brought it to the attention of the CEO. He didn't want to hear it. Fascinating thing I learned. He let her, that COO, be that way because she took care of all the dirty messes for him. And he wanted it that way. Except what he didn't realize is it was costing him dearly. When they brought me in, the company had gone down from over 90 million a year in sales to 75, 80 million a year in sales. And they didn't realize they were responsible for it. The CEO and the COO. But it was more the COO because people called her his attack dog. That's the terms that people were using. So the summary of all these 12 sessions, and you can go back on YouTube and see them all, is that the leader's self-awareness is really critical because you're modeling behaviors and responsible for all the behaviors you're seeing in your teams. I can't get any plainer than that. You're telling yourself a BS story. You're not reprogramming your mind because you're believing you're thinking, which, by the way, is human. Most people believe they're thinking. That's the challenge. I talk about it plainly, how to reprogram the mind, and your brain is brilliant. And it's not always your friend, right? So I've written these books to help people. And I give these keynote talks and then do reinforcement training and coaching to help people build a culture that's healthy. I have companies that use me at the CEO level, the COO level, the executive teams, the directors and managers, and even supervisors and leads, because they're building succession by having everyone in the company learn that they're responsible for their outcomes. And if they're complaining to someone who can't do anything about it, they're complaining to a coworker, they're complaining to a neighbor, they're complaining in the cafeteria, and they're not bringing it to the leadership, then they're wasting energy and they're modeling a behavior that others see. So what I want to leave you with is that your brain is brilliant, but it's not always your friend, and leaders need to do this work to begin with. They have to be, even my dog Albie agrees, they have to be the model for teaching people to reprogram their mind. This little acorn brain is the amygdala. Now, it doesn't look like the amygdala because people tell me, Steve, the amygdala looks like a walnut. But most people know an acorn can grow into an oak. They don't know what a walnut tree looks like quickly, but they know that small-minded thinking is the acorn brain, and powerful thinking that leads to powerful outcomes is limitless thinking and learning to just question the brain, your brain. You become more self-aware. And that makes for better leadership. And you got to prove that to yourself. And I'm available to do that work. I love to do this work. I've been doing it for years, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference. But again, you got to prove that to yourself. That when you build a self-aware team, an emotionally intelligent team, it has to begin with you. If you don't want feedback, then how's your team going to like feedback? And whether it's very public or not, you try to keep it quiet that you don't get a 360 from time to time. And I encourage boards of directors to make sure their CEOs and their operating officers get 360s, because it becomes a behavior throughout the company. You don't have to do it every year, but every couple of years. And then especially when you know a leader has challenges, that their team is complaining or their team's performance is falling, that's time right there. That's an indicator that they need a 360. And other people on their teams would benefit. It's raising emotional intelligence. That's your work. It's critical for a CEO, for a board, for all operating officers to learn to become more self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and not to be living as a reaction, but to live as a powerful creator, not a victim of circumstance, a master of circumstances, and teaching people that methodology, not to believe their brain and not to be a reaction, but learn to respond, put a pause in, notice the thinking, notice when the brain is making everyone wrong, notice when the brain has all kinds of complaints, and then do something about it. And there's two things you can do about a complaint and grievance loop in your mind. One is, if you can't control it, let it go. If you can control it, then you have to take the complaint with a request, which means a suggestion, to the person or people that can do something about it. Because now they know you've thought about it to the point where you're willing to suggest something to fix it. It doesn't mean that your suggestion will be accepted. You let that go. R.J. Spina talks about say what you tangibly know to be true, but let go of what you expect the reply to be from others. That's emotional intelligence. And it's choosing powerful thinking and emotions versus primal thinking and low frequency thinking, which when you're stuck in complaints about people and you're stuck in believing this primal thinking, you'll feel those emotions in your body. That's the indicator, because you'll feel anger, depression, stress, sadness, frustration, anxiety. Those are all low frequency emotions that indicate you're stuck in low frequency, primal. David Baer calls it primal in his program called The Mind Hack, calls it primal thinking versus powerful thinking, which is things like accomplishment and problem solving and gratitude, taking gratitude breaks, counting one's blessings, surrender to the moment, and noticing one's thinking and responding instead of reacting. Those are powerful thoughts. If you email me, I have a list of the primal versus the powerful, and I'm glad to send it to you as a resource. You can email me, steve@stevelentini.com. I'll email you my resources. I have a workbook too for Your Brain is Brilliant, but it's not always your friend, to help your teams grow their emotional intelligence and their self-awareness, which makes everyone a better leader. You've got to prove that to yourself. It's made a difference in the companies I've worked with, some of them for 26 years, by the way, another one for over 15 years, another group I've worked with for over 20 years. Why? And no contracts, by the way. No contracts. Why would they keep doing it? It's making a difference. They're helping their teams grow in self-awareness. That's the place to spend a lot of time. Emotional intelligence, raising people's self-awareness, and it begins with the leadership team and leaders. Are you working on your own self-awareness? Are you believing the acorn brain, right? Your brain is brilliant, but it's not always a friend. I suggest to people, hey, listen, tomorrow say and do everything your brain suggests. And they'll say, what? I can't do that. Why? Why can't you do that? Because a lot of those thoughts are crazy. All right, what percent of those thoughts you know for sure you could never say or do? 20%. Okay. Take the next 20% and start to look at those, because somewhere your brain believes them and you're acting on them instead of questioning them. I'm not saying they're all wrong, but emotionally intelligent and self-aware people notice. They notice. We all know the ones that are crazy that we couldn't do anywhere, and we keep them to ourselves. They just float through the mind. The next 20% need to float through the mind with you observing them and questioning them. You become the ones that's questioning. Osho wrote a book called Your Answers Questioned. It's a great title. That's what we need to do in life as leaders. The best leaders question their answers first. And you got to prove that to yourself. And I'm here to help. So you can email me here. I'll show you how. Steve at stevelentini.com. And I have resources I'll send you for free. It's my work in life is to help people. And whether it leads to a revenue stream or an income, I don't have to worry about that because it does. So I'm glad to help. I have a lot of resources. Email me again here, Steve at stevelentini.com, and I'll send you the resources I have for free. In fact, if you're a CEO, I'll mail you a book, but you got to give me your address. Steve at stevelentini.com. I'm glad to help. I'll see you next week with a whole different series of topics on Friday mornings about leadership. So thank you very much. I'm grateful for your attention.